It started with a whisper. Not the kind you hear but the kind you feel. Somewhere deep beneath your ribs. A knock, not urgent, not desperate, just tired. He opened the door, expecting a delivery. A salesperson, maybe another mistake, but what he found was a girl, thin mud-caked shoes. A small suitcase clutched like it carried her whole life. Inside and maybe it did. She didn't say much at first, just stood there on the porch, shoulders squared like she was holding back a storm. Then came the line, "I just needed a job, sir." Her voice cracked on the last word, not with weakness, but restraint. And something in that moment made the old man the one who hadn't hired anyone in years, the one whose house had gone quiet since his wife passed freeze, because those 7 words didn't ask for charity, they asked for purpose. They asked for a chance, and he hadn't realized how long it had been since someone asked him for anything at all. Her name was Callie, 19. No references, no resume, just a bruised voice and a work ethic that felt like a lifeline. He almost said no. Almost closed the door, out of habit. But then she looked up, and her eyes, not begging, not hopeful, just empty, like she'd already heard no so many times. One more wouldn't surprise her, so instead, he stepped aside, didn't speak, just nodded, and for the first time in 3 years, someone stepped into his home. The house had once been warm, laughed, the home with pies cooling in the window, and country music humming through the halls. Down now, it was wood creaking under silence. Callie followed him through the narrow hallway, her fingers brushing the faded floral wallpaper as if she were memorizing it. She didn't ask questions, just listened as he gestured to the guest room. "Not much," he muttered, rubbing the back of his neck. "But there's clean sheets. You can sleep here. We'll talk in the morning." She nodded once, then again, like she was making sure she understood the language of kindness. And then, barely above a whisper, "Thank you, sir." He didn't sleep much that night, not because he was worried, not because he didn't trust her, but because, for the first time in years, there were footsteps upstairs, soft ones, gentle ones, like someone trying not to disturb ghosts, and maybe that's what she was doing, because this house, it was full of them. His wife's shawl still draped over the kitchen chair, the indent on the mattress where she used to sleep, the broken grandfather clock she loved, frozen at 7:43 p.m. The minute the hospital called. Callie didn't know any of that, but somehow, in her silence, she respected it. The next morning she was already awake, hair tied back, dressed in the same clothes. She stood in the kitchen holding a cracked coffee mug with both hands like it was sacred. He poured himself a cup, sat across from her, no words yet, then she cleared her throat. "I can clean. I can cook. A little. I don't take up much space." He studied her, long enough for her to fidget, then said something he hadn't said in years. "You got family?" The pause was long, then came a shrug. "They stopped being mine a while ago." He didn't ask more, didn't need to. Sometimes the silence says enough. By week 2, the house began to change. She fixed the loose floorboard in the hallway. She scrubbed the sink until it gleamed, like it did the day his wife first picked it out. She hummed, not loud, not cheerful, just enough to let the silence know it didn't own the place anymore. He didn't know why he let her stay, didn't understand why he found himself buying a second toothbrush, or why he started picking up her favorite cereal, even though she never asked. But there was something about the way she moved through the house. Careful, grateful, like every chore was a thank you. Then came the storm, not the one outside, but the one inside her. He found her one night in the shed, kneeling, shaking, holding something small and crumpled in her hands. He didn't ask what it was. Didn't press, just sat beside her, quietly. Minutes passed before she spoke. "He used to lock me in closets," she said, not looking at him. Said it was quieter that way. The words hung heavy. He stared at the floor, then said gently, "Well, you're not in a closet anymore." She nodded once, and then did something that caught him off guard. She leaned into him, for long, but long enough to remind him what it felt like to be needed. The next morning, something was different, not louder, not brighter, just different. Callie was still up before sunrise, still quiet, still moving with that same careful grace like every floorboard had secrets. But now, she greeted him. Just a little nod. "Just a little morning, sir." And that was new. That morning, they ate toast at the same table. He offered eggs. She declined. He didn't push, but he noticed the way her eyes kept drifting toward the picture on the wall, the one of his wife in the sunflower dress, holding a pie bigger than her smile. That was Miriam. He finally said. Callie looked down. She seemed kind. He smiled softly. She was. They both went quiet after that. Sometimes pain doesn't need revisiting. Sometimes it just needs company. She started cooking more, cleaning more, folding his laundry without being asked. He tried to pay her. She refused. He insisted, so she took half, only because he said it made him feel better. And still, she called him sir. Always sir. Even though he told her a dozen times, "You can call me Walt." But old habits don't break easy. Not the ones that protected her. One afternoon, he came back from town with paint. Didn't say why, just left it by her door. She found it that evening, her fingers trailing the edge of the can like it was a gift from another world. Is this for me? He shrugged. Thought you might like to make the room yours. She stared at the label. Sunset Rose. It was the same color she once saw in a magazine. The one her foster mom said was too loud for someone like you. But Walt didn't say that. He just left the door open. And by the next week, the room smelled like fresh paint and second chances. One evening, Walt made chili. It was his wife's old recipe. Took hours, but he didn't mind. Callie sat at the counter, cross-legged in a way that made her seem younger than 19. When he finally served it, she smiled. It was the first time he'd seen her smile fully. Smells like memories, she said. Walt looked at her, surprised, and maybe a little scared, because it did. It smelled like laughter echoing off these old walls, like rainy afternoons and flannel robes and music on the radio that didn't need words. And for the first time in forever, he allowed himself to feel it, not just the grief, but the gratitude that came before it. That night they sat on the porch. No words. Just the creak of the swing, the hum of the crickets, and Callie beside him, curled in a borrowed sweater, the sleeves covering her hands. Then came the whisper. You think? Some people are just born to be alone. He looked at her. Really? Looked. No, he said, but I think some people are taught that. She nodded slowly, swallowed hard. Then whispered. I used to think love was just survival with prettier words. Walt stared ahead. You ever been hugged, Callie? She laughed once. Bitter. Sure. The kind where you brace for what comes after. He didn't say anything, didn't move, just sat there and let the silence hold her better than most arms ever had. The first time she called him Walt, it was an accident. She burned the cornbread, and she panicked, ran to the porch, hair flying, eyes wide. Walt, she shouted. Then froze, covered her mouth like she'd said a curse. But he didn't scold her. He laughed, loud, full, rusty, like an old engine finally turning over. And she blinked like she couldn't believe she'd made that happen. She whispered, sorry. He wiped his eyes and said, don't be. Been a while since I heard my name with that much care behind it. Winter came, soft at first. Then hard. The power went out for a few nights. Pipes froze. Wind screamed against the walls like something wild and angry. But inside the house, it was warm because they had chili and candles. And each other. She read books by flashlight. He taught her chess. She always lost, but never complained. And once, when he dozed off in his chair, she draped a quilt over him and whispered, you look like safety. She didn't think he heard, but he did, and he didn't sleep after that, not because he couldn't, but because his heart wouldn't let him. It was mid-January when the letter came. Callie found it in the mailbox, half buried under flyers and cold air. The return address made her chest tighten. Jefferson County Family Services. Asterisk. She didn't open it right away. She just stood there, the snow falling around her, the envelope shaking in her hand. Walt saw her through the window. He didn't ask questions at first. He just poured her coffee and waited. Later that night, she slid the letter across the table. Her hands trembled slightly. I thought they forgot about me. Walt read it once, then again. Then looked up at her. They want you back? She shook her head. No, just reminding me that I age out in 2 months. They say my case is closed, that I'm an adult now. She laughed bitterly. Funny how the world decides you're grown once they no longer want to care for you. Walt's jaw clenched, then softened. You're not a case file here, he said gently. You're Callie, that's all. But it stirred something in her, a fear, a rusted instinct, like maybe all this warmth, this quiet, this strange man who made her laugh and made her feel human was temporary. And temporary things, she had learned, were dangerous, so she started packing at night. Just one shirt at a time, just in case, because if you're ready to leave, it doesn't hurt as bad when someone asks you to. Walt noticed, of course he did. The toothbrush gone from the bathroom. The way she avoided his eyes during dinner. The return of Sir instead of Walt. He let it go for 3 days. Then on the 4th, he walked into the guest room and found the suitcase half-packed. He sat on the edge of the bed. Where are you headed? She flinched. Nowhere, just being smart. He looked at her calm, but steady. You think I'm gonna kick you out? She didn't answer. He leaned forward. Callie, do you want to leave? Still, no answer. But her silence said everything. He reached for her hand. She stiffened but didn't pull away. I don't give half chances, he said quietly. If you're here, you're mine. Not for chores, not for charity. Because I see you, she whispered. But what if you change your mind? He took a long breath, then said something she'd never heard from anyone in her life. Then I'll remind myself I already decided. You don't unchoose people you call family. That night, she cried. Not loud, not broken, but the kind of crying that shakes you without sound. And Walt didn't try to stop her, didn't rush it. He just brought her a blanket and sat outside her room with a book, letting her know he was there and would be weeks past. The snow started to melt. Callie started singing in the kitchen. Just a little, off-key, but joy doesn't need to be In tune. Walt taught her how to drive. She stalled the truck 3 times, laughed every time. He fixed up the shed into a tiny studio just for her. She painted the walls the same sunset rose, hung photos, drew little notes and taped them to the mirror. One said, "Things that are mine. This sweater, this mug, this chance." And under it, in Walt's handwriting, "You forgot one. This home." But peace doesn't last without test. And hers came in the form of a man with a crooked grin and a cheap cologne. He showed up one afternoon, said he was just passing through, called her sweetheart like it was a warning. Walt saw her freeze at the doorway. Saw the color drain from her cheeks. He didn't need context. He just stepped between them, told the man to leave. The man smirked. "She's got a record of walking. Thought I'd see if she still remembers who put food on her plate." Walt didn't blink. But his voice turned steel. "You put chains on a child and called it dinner. That ain't feeding. That's starving with rules." The man laughed once. "Careful, old man." Walt stepped forward. "I don't fight often, but I protect always." The man left. Callie didn't move, didn't speak. Until Walt turned and said, "No one owns you. Not here, not ever again." That night, she stood in the doorway of his study. Walt was filing receipts, pretending like his hands weren't still shaking. "Walt," she said, voice quiet. He looked up. Then she asked it softly, brokenly, "Why are you kind to me?" He didn't answer right away. Just closed the folder, took a breath, and said, "Because someone should have been a long time ago." March brought warmth. Not just to the weather, but to the girl who no longer flinched. When you said her name kindly, Callie started wearing color. Soft greens, a yellow scarf. She danced once in the kitchen. Not for anyone. Not to impress, just because she could. Walt saw her through the window. Didn't say a word, but his eyes were glassy. Because sometimes healing doesn't announce itself. Sometimes it just shows up in small ways, like the way someone twirls when no one's looking. One Sunday morning, Walt drove her into town, said there was something he wanted to show her. She didn't ask questions. Just watched the world go by through the truck window, her fingers trailing the wind. They pulled up to a small, weathered building with chipped paint and a crooked sign. "Old place," he said. "Used to be a bakery, been closed for years." She followed him inside. The smell of dust and old dreams thick in the air. He handed her a key. She blinked. "What's this?" He didn't smile, didn't joke, just looked at her with eyes full of something weightier than words. "It's yours, if you want it. I've seen your drawings, your ideas. Thought maybe this place could be something again. With you in it." She stared at the key like it might disappear. Her voice cracked. I'm not someone people trust with things." Walt stepped closer, put the key in her hand, wrapped his fingers around hers, and said the line that would change everything. "You said you needed a job, Callie, but what you really needed was to be seen, to be safe, to be home. And today, I'm telling you what I should have said the day you knocked on my door." He held her hand tight. "You just found a family." She cried, openly, ugly, shaking, and for once, she didn't apologize for it, didn't hide her face. Walt pulled her close, let her cry into his flannel shirt, and whispered, "No more closets. No more running. You stay, as long as you want. As long as you need," she whispered back. "Forever, if I can." He smiled. "Then forever, it is." They opened the place together, repainted the walls, replaced the glass, hung a sign above the door. Callie's place, warm meals and warmer hearts. She baked. He brewed coffee. Locals came, then friends, then strangers who didn't feel like strangers for long. People asked if they were father and daughter. Walt always said something like that, and Callie would just smile and squeeze his arm, like she knew the truth was bigger than labels. She still had scars, still had nightmares some nights, but she never had to face them alone. And every morning, she'd open the café, turn on the lights, and whisper, "Another day, another chance." And sometimes, when the bell above the door rang, she'd look up, half hoping someone else like her would walk in. Someone tired, someone lost, and she'd smile, that soft, knowing smile, because she understood now. She wasn't just healing, she was a healer. She wasn't just safe, she was someone's safety. But there was one day years later that sealed it all. She was standing behind the counter, covered in flour, hair tied back, laughing with a customer when a young girl walked in. Same look Callie once had. Small suitcase. Brittle voice, eyes like broken glass. And when she reached the counter, she whispered, I just need a job, ma'am." And Callie's heart cracked wide open, because it was her all over again. So she walked around the counter, took the girl's hand, and said, through tears, "Then you just found a family." Years passed, Callie never left. She grew into the space like roots, finding water steadily, deeply, quietly. The cafe became more than a place to eat. It became a home for those without one. A place where second chances came with fresh biscuits and a smile that didn't ask questions. People started calling her Miss Callie. Walt still called her kid. She never minded he grew older, slower, sometimes forgot where he left his glasses, sometimes needed help tying his boots. and Callie never let him feel ashamed of that, just grinned and said, "You walked beside me when I could barely crawl. Now it's my turn." Walt would pretend to grumble, but his eyes always gave him away. One evening, after closing up, she found him sitting out back beneath the stars, quiet hands folded in his lap, a familiar stillness in his posture. She sat beside him, two steaming mugs in hand. They didn't speak for a while. Then he said, voice soft, "Never thought I'd get to watch someone become." She turned to him, "Beco what?" He smiled without looking at her. "Loved, whole real." She swallowed hard, then whispered, "You did that." Walt shook his head slowly. "No, Callie, you did." He reached for her hand, older now, shaking slightly, and gripped it like it was the anchor he never knew he needed. "I just reminded you, you had it in you. But you built it." When he passed the following spring, it was quiet. No pain, no drama, just a Sunday morning nap that he didn't wake up from. She found him with a book on his chest, glasses sliding off his nose, lips still curled slightly, from a dream he never got to finish. She didn't cry right away. She sat beside him, held his hand, and whispered, "You didn't just give me a job, you gave me a life, a name, a forever." Then she kissed his forehead, tucked the blanket higher on his chest, and said, "Rest easy, Walt, you're home." The town came out for him, old farmers, young waitresses, kids, who grew up on his stories. Everyone had something to say, but Callie didn't speak at the funeral. She stood in the front row, hands folded, holding the pocket knife he once gave her just in case, and when it was over, she walked back to the café and flipped the sign to "Close today, come back tomorrow." Then she turned on the radio, baked his favorite pie, and opened the front window like always. Because grief, like love, needs space to breathe. The years that followed were full of laughter, of healing, of stories passed down through slices of cake and shared silence. And every time a scared voice came through the door, whispering, "I just need a job," Callie would smile, step forward, take their hand, and say the words that once saved her life. "Then you just found a family." Because kindness isn't just something you give, it's something you become, and she had become everything she once needed and everything Walt always saw in her. In memory of those who opened their doors and became someone's forever.